And pretty much everyone just ends up running, but the white cops are being killed, and I was like, yes, like, kill them white people. Oh my god, when I tell you that I've already recorded this, and iMovie just wasn't gonna let me be great. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Hello, everyone who's new. Welcome to my channel. If you're not new, you already know who the hell I am. So it's your girl, Umi, and I'm here today to re-record this video. This is actually going to be a beatdown breakdown of the HBO series Lovecraft Country, a show that is so confusing and so like all over the place that at first I'm watching this and I'm just like, am I in the middle of my sleep paralysis? Like, am I actually like consciously aware of what's happening? And it's so funny because actually this series was actually recommended to me by one of my friends, Naomi. Shout out to Naomi, how you doing? Also, shirt, I got this from Naomi. Please check out her Depop store. I'm going to be putting the link down in the description box because this is an ecosystem. She basically sells just these really cute pieces on Depop. It's kind of like an online thrift store. Pretty affordable because we can't support Fashion Nova anymore. We can't support big companies anymore because they out here not paying their employees. And we don't do that. We can't do that. So I've just been buying from her because why not? It's a great way to support one of my really good friends and also a great way to save the environment. No, actually, like the average American throws out like 80 or 90 pounds of clothing out in the garbage every single year. That's insane to me. So I figured, like, why not recycle clothes? It would make sense. Save the environment. I'm trying to have kids and grandkids and great grandkids, and they can't live on this planet if there ain't no planet. Please do check out her store and support her and everything because that's my girl. That's my baby. Also, she is the inspiration of today's video because I'm going to be reviewing the HBO series Lovecraft Country. And this show is a lot. I guess I'm just gonna start off by saying that if you expect normal things to happen in this show, girl, you won't be in for a loop. Initially going into it, my friend Naomi said, this is a really weird show. I want you to be able to explain to me what's happening. And I said, girl, I got you. So initially, I thought the premise of it when I had read it, and the premise of the show is a man's journey in search of his missing father becomes a struggle to survive racist terrors and terrifying monsters. I didn't realize that this show was gonna be more than I could actually be able to handle because it was so surprising just how many things were going on. The show is actually inspired by a book series, or at least a book, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's just one book, aptly also titled Lovecraft Country. Did y'all know that it was actually written by a white man? Like, you would think that a show that centers around African-American people, and like the main protagonists are African-Americans, you would think the show would be written by a black person. I don't know why I thought that. I was actually kind of really surprised. What would a white person know about the trials and tribulations of black people? But then I quickly learned that no, like they can also know these things as well. It basically follows the story of our main protagonist, Atticus Freeman. His father is missing and he goes on this journey to try to find him, but he ends up discovering a lot more than just finding his father. He also ends up discovering a whole world of just like magic and supernatural beings. So far it's right now 5 episodes in, and I'm gonna be breaking down the 5 episodes as quickly as possible because I don't want this video to be too long. I would want this video to be at most 30 minutes just to break down these 5 episodes. The first episode's name is titled Sundown, and I'm gonna explain as to why this episode is titled Sundown in a little bit. It's gonna be mentioned in the first episode, but we open up the episode with a dream sequence, and it seems as though we see our main protagonist. He's fighting in the war, and if this is confusing, it's about to get even more confusing, best believe. So he's in the trenches fighting, and we all of a sudden see a bunch of like monsters and like robots. We see a bunch of like octopi as well, and I'm just like, what? Also, don't judge me for my Starbucks. I had $10 left on my Starbucks card from like March or whenever it was the last time that we were able to go outside. So I used those $10 to buy my Frappuccino today. Nobody judge me, please. We end up meeting Jamie Chung. Jamie Chung, if you don't know who she is, I remember her from that Disney Channel movie. I forgot what movie it was, but she was on Disney Channel. And she was also in Sucker Punch. I remember that as well. She's like this red alien creature. She ends up hugging Tick. And then an alien comes out of nowhere, and then Jackie Robinson shows up and saves them. I don't know what's going on. Tick wakes up on the bus, and he's actually heading back home to Chicago because his father has gone missing. He's also sitting in the back of the bus. Let me just give you the setting of this entire show. This show is taking place in the 1950s. If I'm not mistaken. If you don't know anything about segregated America during that time, I'm just gonna assume that you never pay attention in class. But that was not a fun time for African American folk. It was a very troubling time for colored people, but specifically African American people. I knew that it was going to be taking place during this time. The reason why that this show is actually titled Lovecraft Country is because if the name sounds familiar, it's basically inspired by H.p Lovecraft. If you don't know who H.p Lovecraft is, he was a famous American author in like the early 1900s or like the late 1800s who would write fictional horror stories. The series is actually inspired by H.p Lovecraft's writing, and it's just, instead of having white protagonists in the story, it has instead of black protagonists in the story. Tick is back home to Chicago. We end up meeting his uncle, George Freeman, his aunt, Hippolyta Freeman, and we also meet his cousin. Tick lets his uncle know that he had gotten a letter from his father, basically stating that he needs to go and try to find out more about his family's history, especially his mother's history. Because apparently they don't really know much about where it is that she came from. The letter is incredibly cryptic, and it almost sounds like it's actually not written by his father. Tick reads the letter, and apparently the place that he needs to go to find out more about his ancestry is in, they say Arkham, Massachusetts, but it's actually Arkham, Massachusetts. I'm not sure if it's actually a fictional location. Knowing this show and knowing how H.p Lovecraft based his story centered around the East Coast, and specifically around Massachusetts, it's most likely a fictional place. Also, I need to explain this as well. Tick is actually a veteran of the Korean American War. Next, we have a scene of a block party. There's a block party going on in this all-black neighborhood because, you know, again, segregation. We end up meeting our third protagonist. So far we have Tick Freeman, his uncle George Freeman, and our third protagonist is Letitia Lewis, who is by far the most annoying character I think I've ever like seen in any series of anything, to be honest. She's so freaking annoying. She has a sister named Ruby, and there seems to be tension between her and the sister. I would hope that that's not a case of colorism, because we know how black families, it's very, colorism is a real thing. Basically anyone who's non-white, like anyone who's non-white, you've most likely experienced colorism in your family if there are varying different members in your family that have different shades. We jump a little bit, and Tick is explaining to his uncle George that he needs to journey out into Lovecraft Country and he's gonna need a car. His uncle has a car. Tick goes to his father's apartment, but it's very weird because in the very beginning we see like a silver BMW. I don't know what kind of car this is. All you need to know is a fancy white person car. That's all you need to know about this car. But just parked outside, and we're going to see this car pretty sporadically throughout the series actually so far. Tick ends up at his apartment. He browses around to try to see if he can find more clues. He ends up taking the phone, calling South Korea, and in this part he ends up reaching Gia, who is Jamie Chung's character in this series. We don't know the import of her just yet. Jamie Chung answers, and I'm sorry, I have to call her Jamie Chung because why not, right? And Jamie Chung is just like, you went home, you shouldn't have. And then he just hangs up. Anyways, the next morning is time for Tick and his uncle to leave, and then for some unknown reason, Letitia, or Letty in this show, that's her name, is going to be accompany them on this trip. I don't know why. I don't understand what's the point of her coming onto this trip, but she's coming along, right? And so they go cross country. We see how absolutely insane segregated America was. Like, child, oh god. We see like the first depiction of what a sundown county or sundown town is. If you don't really know anything about sundown towns, they're predominantly white neighborhoods or white towns that would not allow people of color to be walking around the streets, especially during at night, because if they did, they were well within their rights to shoot them and claim it to be self-defense because they thought that it was an animal in the woods. White people, bro. I don't know what else to say other than white people. Very swiftly after, they make it to a location known as Simmonsville, and Simmonsville very quickly becomes just one of the oddest places. They end up at a diner in Simmonsville because they want to have a rest stop, they want to eat something, and them white people are shook. Like, they walk into a very empty restaurant to find one cashier and one customer sitting, and they're hella shook that they've seen black people coming in broad daylight to eat something, as if they don't need sustenance. But whatever, right? The one employee that's there is hella shook as well that he's seen black people, but he probably has never seen black people ever in his entire life because, you know, white people. I'm sorry, I'm like trying to do my best to explain this show, but it's so crazy. Like, what? Anyways, Letitia gets up, she goes to the restroom, she ends up going to the very back, but she overhears the server calling someone and saying that, yeah, there are 3 black people who just sat down, seemingly out of nowhere. And at the same time, Tick is looking around the restaurant and he realizes that the place is painted over white. And this is a reference because he asks a question to Uncle George, like, hey, remind me again why the White House is painted white. If you don't know anything about why the White House is specifically painted white, it's because during the War of 1812, British soldiers, because America and Britain were always constantly at war, even during the time of America being first established, they were constantly at war, and so British soldiers had burned down the executive branch, and it was just charred and black, and so they used slaves to paint over it and make it white. Very quickly, as soon as that they said that, Letty just runs out and said, we need to get out of here right now. And yo, the fire department or whoever the hell it is that these people are, they got time, bro. Like I said, like, white people just don't mind their business in this show. Like, I don't know what to say. They're basically chasing after them and trying to shoot them, even though they did basically nothing, chasing them out of town. It ain't even sundown just yet, if this was even a sundown county, but they're chasing them, they're shooting them. Then we see the silver Bentley car thing pop out of nowhere, and then this white woman comes out, and I'm just like, who the hell is this bitch? Like, where the hell did she come from? Our ragtag team makes it out just in time to go to Letty's brother's house, and that's where they stay over the night. And at Letty's brother's house, they try to find a way to kind of still continue their venture out to find Tick's father, but they realize that the place that they need to go to have no guide stops. I haven't actually explained this as well. Uncle George, he creates kind of guide stops and journeys into specifically, you know, around the Midwest, because during that time it's just absolutely rampant around there. So he actually helps out with mapping out certain places that would be safe for black people to travel to, especially because it was very commonly known during that time that if you venture onto a place that you're not supposed to go to and it's predominantly white, you might actually end up being killed. Another scene, George and Tick are talking, and George is basically explaining to him like, hey, you know, your father's a difficult man and I understand that, but you shouldn't really hold it against him. He loves you in his own type of way, and even if you were away at the war, because also Tick and his father have a strained relationship. They don't really tend to get along all that well. They haven't spoken to each other in years, actually. When you were away at the war, he would always come over and he wouldn't directly ask me about, you know, how you're doing, but he would stay all night if he had to, just so I can volunteer some sort of information to know more about how you're doing. And Tick's father is actually upset that Tick even went off to fight in the Korean American War, because it's the very same thing that Muhammad Ali said. I don't know if anyone really remembers, but Muhammad Ali basically had refused to enlist, if I'm not mistaken, in the army for the war, because he said, what is the point of me fighting for a country that doesn't really care about me and hates me for who I am because of my skin color? Which I understand. Like, I wouldn't really fight for this country, and I'm trying to get out of this country. Like, I'm not trying to stay in this damn country. I want to leave.
I'm going to Canada.
Tick, Letty, and George managed to end up at Devon County. And Devon County is exactly where they need to be. They managed to stop the car in the woods. They are seemingly lost and they don't know really which way to go. Cops pulls up seemingly out of nowhere, and this sheriff is hella annoying. He's just like reminding them that this is a sundown country. This episode's name is actually titled Sundown. He reminds them that this is a sundown county and that they need to leave by sundown. However, he does it in a very annoying way, because he knows that sunset is about to be setting in very soon. He knows that sunset is about to be setting in very soon. He knows that they need to leave. However, he's doing whatever he can to distract them and keep them there as long as possible so that he has a reason to actually shoot them and kill them. So annoying. Like I said, white people don't know how to really mind their business back then. It's gotten a lot better, but you still have incidences where luckily we don't have sundown towns anymore. The sheriff tells them that there are 7 minutes until sunset and they need to get out of the town as very quickly as possible. But the sheriff is super freaking annoying. As soon as he tells them, like, hey, you know, you can make it out of here as long as you don't speed, but we'll see if that's actually possible, because Tick tells him we'll make it out of the town in less than 7 minutes. And then Tick asks, hey, if I make a U-turn, would it be illegal? Seemingly innocent question, right? However, no, that's not really the case. He's just like, oh, you think you smart. I want you to ask me real nicely. And then tells him, I want you to ask me, pretty please, will you let this smart make a U-turn here? If I ever hear a white person in real life say the N-word, I'm legitimately decking them in the face. So our team is trying to make it out. But it's not really gonna be that easy, because lo and behold, the sheriff is right behind them and he's doing some tomfoolery and trying to hit them with the car. And I'm just like, white people are so freaking bored. What? This show is crazy. Like, but this was a reality. Like, crazy. Oh my god. Our team makes it just in time out of the county over the railroads, and they are seemingly safe, right? Psych! That's not really the case. And instead, they're blocked off by even more cops of the same county, and the cops take them into the woods because they're trying to kill them, because, you know, just racism. And basically the sheriff is asking something about burglaries that happen, and it doesn't make any sense. He knows that these people are just passing by. He wants to just basically have a reason to provoke them. But Tick is saying, like, hey, I don't know what you're really talking about, but you can search our car. We don't know anything about burglaries. We're not burglars. We're just simply passing through. And the sheriff is just like, I know that this did not just ask me to check his car. And I'm just like, y'all don't got actual crime to stop in your town? Y'all really have decided to make up this whole ass to try to kill these 3 black people in the woods? Don't make no sense. Anyways, but this was the part that really confused me, because out of nowhere we hear rustling and growls and sounds and chittering, and next thing you know, there's a monster and attacks all the white people. What? And pretty much everyone just ends up running, but the white cops are being killed, and I was like, yes, like, kill them white people. But our ragtag team is okay. Somehow the sheriff, unfortunately, is actually not dead, but instead his shoulder is pretty much bitten clean off. And I'm not sure if I can actually show that here on YouTube, but it's pretty disgusting. They're hiding out in the cabin, and Uncle George is just like, you know, they're monsters, and the cops are just like, monsters don't exist. I don't know what the hell you talking about. And Uncle George quotes this line from Dracula, which is just like, these creatures seem like they're afraid of light, because that's why they didn't attack him, because he was holding a flashlight when he was hiding out in the woods. And Tick proposes a plan and says, hey, we need to reach our car and try to get these lights going. And the sheriff is just like, no, you can't go, you're too smart, send out the girl. And Letty is just booking it through the woods. Does she run, no more to cigars? Y'all knew I was gonna refer to BTS in this. BTS is so relevant in everything in life. The sheriff ends up transforming into one of the monsters because he was bitten. And I was just like, what? Are these vampires? Like, what am I looking at? Letty ends up making it to the car. She almost nearly dies as well because another monster pops up just in time for her to turn on the lights, so everything is fine. She ends up crashing the car into the cabin that they're hiding in the woods. Tick and Letty actually end up using flares to try to ward off the monsters. But then we hear a high-pitched whistle seemingly out of nowhere that scares the monsters away, and they're fine for the night. Then the next day, they end up walking, crossing this bridge and going into Artem, their place of destination. And they stumble upon a big ass mansion, seemingly literally out of nowhere. They went to the mansion. We see the silver Bentley. A white dude opens up the door and said, "We've been expecting you, Mr. Freeman." And that's the first episode. So, oh my god, like I was like, what? What is happening here? Where did the monsters even come from? The next episode, the second episode's name is called Whitey's on the Moon, which I'm gonna explain later on. We open up the episode with George and Letty just in their room in this mansion, and they seem to just be a-okay and just grooving it out, dancing. Letty's trying on a whole bunch of dresses because her ass is hella materialistic, and George is enjoying reading a whole bunch of books because he is a avid reader. And it seems as though they seem to be perfectly fine despite the events that have happened in the last episode. But then we get Tick, who is sitting down realizing like, that was so bizarre. Where are we? What is going on? Then a bell rings in the house. George is coming out. He says, yeah, they got my favorite book stocked up in my room. Letty has clothes that seemingly fit her just like a glove, and it's so weird, and we obviously already know as the audience that there's something very disturbing about this house. And then the white dude shows up. He gives them a tour of the facilities of their prison, basically, right? And it seems as though that there is a woman named Mrs. Braithwaite, who is that white woman that we saw in the first episode with the silver Bentley, the rich white people car. However, the original owner of the lodge and the place that they're in is actually owned by a name named Titus Braithwaite, who actually built this retreat apparently for like private reasons. And they ask him like, yo, how did this Titus dude end up having so much money to build this big ass mansion? And the butler dude, his name is William. William explains to them that he amassed his fortune from export, which just translates to slaves. Like, okay, I guess. And then they end up having breakfast. And during breakfast, we end up learning that Letty and George are unable to remember the events of what happened earlier that morning. Because it's not even like it's the next day. It's actually like the same day that they showed up at the mansion from the last episode. They're not aware of what's going on because their memory has been wiped out. Tick is just like, what are y'all talking about? Like, all these things happen. Like, Tick is explaining to them like, yo, we fought monsters in the woods. I had to shoot the sheriff. But as Tick is explaining this, Uncle George tells him like, yo, sit down, we're being watched. And because the William dude is at the window watching them, because again, white people don't know how to mind their business, like. And then they enter into like a town that's like Amish country, like I don't even know what the hell, this weird ass town. And I knew there was something weird about this town because none of the white people are disturbed, but that 3 black people are just walking amongst them. But then they end up hearing a high-pitched whistle, to which they go to investigate, and they stumble upon this silo that seems to be kind of seemingly resembles a prison, in which the guard that's over there, a white woman, who's basically telling them like, no, we don't keep prisoners here, what we keep here is just meat, but to hide the meat away from animals. You guys get like grizzlies, and the woman's like, no, we don't get grizzlies, but we do get black bears. But then she just says like, but the blacks are bad enough, they're smart. And obviously she's alluding to black people. She's calling them beasts, and she says that they're clever enough to cause mischief and that they're always sticking their noses in places that it doesn't belong in. And of course that might be most likely the place that Tick's father is actually staying at. Anyways, they end up through the woods, but then the monsters happen to just pop up out of nowhere. And these monsters are the same monsters that we saw that were like kind of like the vampires that we saw in the first episode. They pop up out of nowhere, seemingly almost attack them, but then they're saved just in time by Miss Braithwaite, that white woman from the fancy white person car. Like, I'm sorry, I have to keep calling the car that because it's just like, you wasn't gonna see no black people drive around in no car like that. So when they end up back at the mansion, Tick ends up meeting the current owner of the lodge, and we end up finding out that this dude is actually Christina's father. Christina is the white woman with the fancy white person car. Introduces himself as kind of just like the Adam of this entire world, and that Christina's father has a mission to use Tick for opening up the Garden of Eden so that he can achieve immortality that way. And because Tick is related to Titus Braithwaite, who is the founder of the lodge, who actually seems to be the founder also of this secret society of like magical KKK members. And the father says like, it seems like you can actually be able to help me, so that's gonna be your mission right now. You're gonna end up help me find out how to open up the door to Eden. Christina takes back Tick to his room. He's basically just like, whatever it is that you did to my family, remove the spell. But obviously Tick is reluctant to help out these white people, and Christina reassures him that they're friends. We get this gem where he basically is just like, I guess the KKK is not calling themselves the Grand Wizards anymore. And then Christina basically says like, my father and his associates will never fraternize with the clan because they is too poor. Not that their ideals are wrong, but that they're just rednecks. Like, what? Anyways, Christina does end up lifting the spell on George and Letty. There's this really weird scene that follows swiftly after, where Christina is helping a cow give birth to one of the monsters that we saw in the wood, like a calf. I think this is supposed to symbolize basically that they're much more kind and loving towards animals, even if these animals are monsters, than they are to black people, because that's kind of how racism is in America and racism in the world in general. People I've noticed will treat animals better than they treat actual human beings. Next few scenes we see Letty, George, and Atticus, and they're all in their own like spell. They're trapped in these kind of illusions and being forced to kind of confront certain things about their lives. Letty sees Tick, and Tick nearly rapes her, but this is like a fake Tick. George ends up seeing this mysterious woman that he seemed to have a thing with, that actually turns out to be Tick's mother, so he's trifling. And Tick actually gets a illusions fight scene with Gia, Jamie Chung's character. I'm just gonna call her Jamie Chung at this point because whatever. And they're all like trapped and being observed as if they're caged animals by the members of the lodge. And I guess the point of this was to actually kind of show like how black people tend to be used as figures of entertainment, that they can be tortured, and that's supposed to be for the amusement of white people. Anyways, Tick is invited to have dinner with the members of the lodge. They're the seemingly only black people, and again, black people are always just kind of looked at like as if they're spectacles. Very weird. Christina's dad, who's like, I'm just gonna call him the magical KKK dude. The magical KKK dude ends up bringing out platters for everyone in which they contain like pieces of his liver, and I'm just like, what? Like, I'm not eating from you, sir. I don't know you like that. And as the magical KKK dude is giving this speech about how this is the time that he's giving a piece of himself for the Brotherhood, but that ends up being interrupted by Uncle George, which he basically explains that, hey, my nephew is actually related to the original founder of this society, known as the Sons of Adam. That's the name of the society, the secret society with the magical KKK members. It's so confusing to explain this. So if he has any sort of orders, y'all have to follow him on this. And in this grand gesture, right, Tick basically tells all the white people in the room and says, I want everyone except for Samuel, who is the magical KKK dude with the liver that he was giving out his liver. He was like, I want every one of y'all except for Samuel to leave this room. And I thought at first, I was like, that's not gonna happen, but then they end up walking out. So the magical KKK dude and Tick are talking. He is unfazed by whatever it is that happened. And he basically lets him know, like, you may seem to think that you have some sort of pull just because you're related by blood to Titus Braithwaite. However, that means very little. And don't think that just because your blood seems to be special doesn't mean that you are not expendable. Then Tick and George end up going to the tower that was in town to try to see if they can find Tick's father. And then they end up finding a hole in a very, very reminiscent of Shawshank Redemption. Tick's father actually ended up escaping through the hole that was there. And so our ragtag team ends up finding Tick's father. His name is Montrose, who is played by Omar from The Wire. He's not impressed to actually see them. He's just like, what are y'all doing here? Like, I can save my damn self. And Tick is just like, well, we have been trying to find you, been missing. But our ragtag team, along with Omar from The Wire, his name is Montrose in the show. I'm sorry, I should call him Montrose. I shouldn't call him Omar from The Wire. But I just couldn't help myself. But they end up getting into the silver Bentley car to try to leave the place because they obviously realize that there's something very wrong. They need to escape. They got what they came for. They saved Tick's father. That's all they need to do. But it's really not that easy. And as they're trying to escape, they end up crashing their car against a force field at the bridge. Christina and her father end up pulling up. Christina's father ends up shooting Letty in the stomach, in which I was like, finally, I want her to be dead. Like, she's so freaking annoying. I actually hate her as a character. And Letty actually ends up dying from her gunshot wound. Right? Then Samuel ends up aiming the gun towards Uncle George and tells Tick, well, since you're a son of sons, which is basically if you're a direct descendant of Titus Braithwaite, we're going to see if you're willing to sacrifice any more of your family. Samuel ends up aiming the gun and shoots Uncle George as well. And of course that works because Tick ends up having to get ready for this ceremony in which he has to use his body and whatever power that he has to open up the door of the Garden of Eden. White people. In a way, this is actually very reminiscent of, if you guys remember the movie Get Out, it's basically just like that black people are always kind of constantly used for the advancement of society and overall the advancement of white people. We see it in history as well. Slavery is basically just like that. Samuel actually makes a promise to Tick that if he participates in the ceremony, he will bring back Letty, and he will also bring back Uncle George, and they will heal from their wounds. As long as Tick ends up doing the ceremony and Samuel ends up achieving his ultimate goal, he will also bring back Uncle George. A discussion between Montrose and George, in which George basically alludes that Tick might not actually be Montrose's son, and it might actually be his son because he seemingly had an affair with Tick's mother. But whatever, inconsequential, right? So anyways, the ceremony thing is happening, and there is a poem that's actually being recited during this time that's titled Whitey's on the Moon. And what it basically is this poem actually explains how the US government and American society is always willing to invest money into different things. The US moon landing, the first man on the moon, achieving that goal, spending billions of dollars to achieve that. Yet the African American people back in the US are always constantly suffering. The US government is always willing to pour in money into stupid and meaningless ventures, but still managing to prioritize those meaningless things over the lives of people of color back in their country. And that's pretty accurate. Anyways, the ceremony is happening. While the ceremony is happening, Tick ends up seeing a vision of who we believe to be his ancestor. Her name is Hannah, and she is like this pregnant woman. In the beginning of the episode, William, the butler dude, was basically explaining to them how this lodge they're currently in was actually rebuilt after a fire that happened decades ago. And it seems like the same thing happened again this time because because it seemed like back then they were attempting to use Hannah, who is the ancestor of Tick, to be able to open the Garden of Eden. However, that didn't end up working out and ended up destroying the mansion. And the same thing is happening now with Tick, in which he's being used to open up the Garden of Eden, but now the mansion is just being destroyed. And so he barely manages to escape the place. But we do end up seeing a running sequence while Tick is running out, and we see Hannah right before him also running while the place is ablaze, and she's carrying a book, and I'm assuming that this is the book that's basically the end game of this whole entire series. The secret society is trying to find out more about this book so that they can decode the language of Adam to be able to open up the Garden of Eden and achieve immortality. That was a mouthful to actually having to explain. I hope I made sense. I understand it, but it's difficult for me to actually articulate it and explain it into this damn video because I already have a headache. Anyways, the mansion ends up being destroyed. Tick makes it out. Unfortunately, not everyone is okay because Uncle George ended up dying from his wounds because the magical KKK dude was just like, yeah, you finish this ritual. After that, I'll be able to save your uncle. And he ain't gonna save the uncle now. Very sad and unfortunate because I didn't want the uncle to die, but I wanted actually Letty to die. Like, very heartbreaking scene to see Uncle George die because I actually did like him a lot so far out of all these characters. Literally, I hate everyone in this show except for like the white butler dude and Uncle George, who's unfortunately now passed away. The next episode's name is titled Holy Ghost, and Holy Ghost by far is probably my favorite episode because it's so funny. Like, it's so funny. I was just like, what? Anyways, the episode opens up with Letty dragging her sister Ruby through this seemingly white neighborhood because we see, again, throughout this entire episode, you just see like white people constantly watching black people. Letty is dragging her sister and taking her to this house saying, hey, how would you feel about not having to ever pay rent ever again? Shows her this rinky-dinky ass house that she bought, and Ruby's reaction is exactly how I felt about it. I was like, yeah, this dusty ass house, I'll be damned if I gotta buy this from someone. I don't care how cheap it is. Can you imagine how much the renovations would cost? Ew. And so Letty drags her sister into the house and basically says, I'm about to make this a boarding house because it has so many rooms for colored folks. And Ruby warns her, like, you know, that's not really gonna be easy because you can't just move into a predominantly white neighborhood as a black person. That's not how things work. But Letty's not really willing to listen to any of that. And so they venture out into the house, but she does end up actually convincing her sister and telling her, like, you know, I just want us to be able to be closer as sisters. You know, we only really have each other type of shit. Letitia's so annoying. She's so manipulative and just so self-centered that it's actually like drives me crazy watching this show. Yeah, as they're venturing into the house, Letitia shows her that there is an elevator, but the elevator nearly whacks off her head, and I was just like, oh my god, like, what? Like, why didn't they just kill her? Like, I'm tired of her. She's so annoying. Also, I have to state this. This show isn't really particularly surprising. Like, nothing about the show is really surprising. Everything is actually really predictable. If you want to be surprised, I would recommend you watch Attack on Titan. That's a show that will surprise you, bitch. Like, that's a show that will have you be like, what? Anyways, we're back home in Chicago, if you haven't realized, and Tick is back home with his aunt and his cousin, and of course, you know, Hippolyta, who is the aunt, she's grieving the death of her husband, but she, you know, she has to kind of keep things moving, and because they have a business that they've opened up. However, Tick realizes that he's actually overstayed his welcome in the house, and so he goes to his father's house in an attempt to try to room with him instead, because he feels like it's really tense to be there. But Tick's father as well is also grieving over the loss of his brother as well. Tick feels as though that him and his father should at least tell his aunt Hippolyta about George's death, but Montrose is basically saying that there's nothing that they can do. Hippolyta can't do anything about it, and it is what it is. They get into this weird tense moment with each other, and then Tick just ends up leaving. He goes over to Letitia's house actually, and Letitia's moving in a whole bunch of colored people to live there in the house with them, and it seems as though Letitia's actually trying to live a normal life even after the events that have happened in Artem. Met monsters and they know about magic. I don't know how you're able to really do that, but whatever. Then we just see a bunch of just tomfoolery. We hear car horns going off, and it's the white neighbors who are unwilling to let colored people to live in the same neighborhood that they are. They park their cars right in front of their house with brakes over the horns to basically try to drive the black people nuts. And the cops pass through, but does law enforcement do anything? No. So what do I expect from a sector of the government that's basically descended from the KKK? Anyways, Letitia's sleeping in the next scene in the morning, and we see this extremely creepy ass face over her bed looking at her with its mouth missing. Letitia wakes up. We still hear the honking going off in outside with the cars, which I found like it was so stupid because they all live in the neighborhood, right? Why would they need to put bricks on their car horns to drive the black people insane? Wouldn't they also be driving themselves insane? Nobody in the neighborhood would sleep. But it seems as though this whole point was that white people were willing to do whatever it takes, even if at their own discomfort, to drive black people insane because white people just don't know how to mind their business. Anyways, Letitia ends up going to the boiler room because she hears something about the boiler going off. She almost steps over this bear trap, very dangerous, and she hears noises in the boiler room as well, in which she ends up freaking out, calling Tick over to come downstairs to say, and she's saying like, no, like there's somebody here. This episode is so funny to watch. And Tick, of course, offers, because in his savior complex, he's just like, well, I'm gonna try to keep watch because you obviously seemed incredibly freaked out by whatever it is that's happening in the house. And they have this sexual tension between the two of them, and it's so annoying because I was like, oh, if only she died in the last episode. But I guess that's not really gonna be the case now, is it? Anyways, it's time for the housewarming party, and everyone is enjoying themselves. The white people outside are not. They're just watching everything, and it's just like, well, I guess it is what it is. Also, the housewarming party is blasting music, I guess because Letty wants to drown out the noise. The car is outside. She's not going to let a bunch of her racist neighbors drive her out of the neighborhood. She just wants to live and have a good time. And I was like, sure, sis. Honestly, I'm finished with my makeup and I still gotta explain this damn show. Like, damn. Oh god, it's so long right now. I can't. Also kind of inconsequential really right now, but Hippolyta is also at the housewarming party, and she also stumbles upon this solar system model that is not really important right now, but it will, I'm guessing, supposed to be playing some sort of important part later on in the story, because we end up finding out that this piece is incredibly sought after by Christina and probably the other members of the secret KKK magical clan. Then Letitia's out here, she's dancing with this dude Tick happens to see, and there's a song of just like, is you or is you not my baby playing in the background, but I'm just like, she's everybody's baby. She for the streets. So Letitia ends up going to the bathroom, and Tick comes in and they end up schmanging it out, and it's actually her first time because when Tick happens to pull out, he notices that there's blood, and she tells him that it's actually at the time of her month. I don't know why you had to lie about that, sis. So the party about to end very quick because the white neighbors end up putting a burning cross out on their lawn, and Letitia is just fed up. My girl goes and basically pulls a Beyonce hold up music video moment of just smashing windows with a baseball bat and walking around with a dress that's hella flowy and just fits her really well. I'm not gonna lie, I want this dress. I don't know where she got this dress, but I want it. And removes the bricks that are on top of the car horns that have been blaring non-stop in the neighborhood. So I guess everybody gonna have a peaceful night of sleep for the first time in a few days, right? And the cops end up showing up. She ends up being arrested by this incredibly racist police sheriff or police sergeant. I don't know who this dude is. And the police sheriff dude is basically just like, you know, we've heard several complaints about you from your neighbors. And she says, well, have y'all gotten the 20-something complaints that I've been sending to your office? And of course, because, you know, racism works so well in this country, they say no, we haven't gotten any of these complaints at all. Anyways, also, the police sergeant dude alludes something about the house and saying that she only has a limited amount of time there because it seems as though he had found the body parts of 8 black people in the basement of that house, and that he seems to know more about this house than he's actually letting on. So The next scene, Letitia ends up finding out that yes, this house is indeed haunted. Also, people are moving out of the house because they're pretty much afraid of just the white people constantly antagonizing them. And Ruby basically catches up with her and says, hey, like, what are we gonna do about our residents like leaving our house? We need to be able to pay off whatever it is kind of payment that they gotta pay off. But then he actually slips up and basically says that there is enough money to cover whatever kind of payments that they have from the money that she received from her mother. Ruby is kind of just like, what do you mean? I didn't even know that mom had enough money, that all that money actually came from mom. And Letitia basically says, I didn't want to really tell you because I didn't want you to be angry, which Ruby is understandably upset just because it seems as though Letitia and her mother have never had a close relationship with each other, and she didn't even come to her mother's funeral actually when her mother had passed away. So it seemed kind of odd that the money was given to Letitia and not to Ruby. And not only that, but Letitia didn't let her sister know and split it up evenly between her and their brother. But then Ruby ends up calling out Letitia and basically saying, well, you're a selfish bitch anyway. All you ever worried about is yourself. You don't care about nobody. You said that you want to build this, you want to buy this house to help out our people, but all she's done really is just move in her friends. In the next scene, Letitia and Tick are actually sitting down, and Letitia is basically running, I'm sorry, I should just call her Letty. But Letty's basically running down everything about the house that she happened to gather information on. That it turns out that the house was actually owned by a disgraced professor named Hiram Epstein, and he actually had happened to turn out to be fired from the University of Chicago because of unethical experimentations. And it turns out that the 8 Black people that were found in the house were actually from the south side of Chicago, kidnapped, brought over to Hiram so that he can experiment on them by doing some Dr. Frankenstein nonsense thing. And I'm just like, it's like the show just gets stranger and stranger. And oh my god, now is basically just like my favorite part of this entire it's literally my favorite part of this entire show because oh my god. So Letitia has this grand idea, right, to bring a witch doctor slash shaman slash whatever the hell it is. This lady comes in to basically bless the house and to cleanse the house to get rid of the spirit. She ends up slitting the throat of a goat. That's not actually what's funny, but what's actually funny is that the African in me was literally quaking. I was like, oh my god, like this Creole woman just came in. She's like, we're here to cleanse the house to get rid of the spirits. And literally in my mind, all I could think was like,
I'm a shoot, get out my motherfucking house. Who you think? Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god, Lord Jesus! Lord Jesus! Lord Jesus! Oh,
the 3 main antagonists of this episode, the 3 white neighbors, have broken into the house. Anyways, Letitia, Tick, and the Creole lady are down in the basement chanting to try to cleanse the house. And at the same time, we see just a couple of ghosts pop up. We see one dude who has like a baby head attached to him. Very scary. It was very scary to actually look at this. But the white people do end up all just dying because they end up getting murdered, you know, swiftly with the quickness. One dude gets his head chopped off by the elevator by sticking his head out.
That's that cracker's head clean off. I'm out of here. You ain't never seen no nigga be gone like I'ma be gone. Tell you something.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Girl, girl. I have a headache explaining this damn show already. Oh my god, I just want this to end. Oh my god, this video is so long already that like I actually quit having to explain this. So I'm just gonna say this, alright? At the end of the episode, they do end up exorcising the house, getting rid of them damn ghosts. And at the same time, we also end up finding out that the house is actually much more magical than it is because it ends up leading to this underground basement, and that's where the 3 white people are at, and it's like hella magical and so weird. We also end up finding out that the inheritance that was given to Letty was actually not not from her mother, it was actually from Christina. Tick is mad, he trying to shoot Christina, but then Christina's like, nah, psych, I have a mission for you. You better find this book of names because I need to get some more spells under my belt. And that's basically just that. I mean, that's it. Oh my god, literally if I explain the show any longer, like, my ears are gonna just burst out. By the way, I have an ear infection again, but that's basically just it. I'm about to wrap up this video. The next 2 episodes were pretty interesting. I end up being unsurprised and finding out that Christina and William, the white butler dude, was the same person, and that Tick's father is gay. Oh my god, but nope, that's basically just the end of that, really. We done with this shit. I'm done. Oh yeah, and also Ruby becomes a white woman. That was really interesting too. Y'all, just watch this show. It's crazy. Oh my god, when I tell you sitting here explaining this was so exhausting. Like, it's 5 episodes. Each episode is an hour long. And it's actually made my brain so fried right now that I literally want to take a nap as soon as I finish this. I'm gonna go and wash my face and just take a nap. This show is so much to explain. Like, my brain is literally like fried right now. But that's basically just the end of that. I've done a beatdown breakdown of this. I don't want this video to be long. I would hope that it's not long while I'm editing it, and if it is, I'm truly very sorry that you have to sit here for nearly an hour while I try to explain this stupid ass show. And I'll catch you guys next time. I'm so tired!
I'm going to Canada.